The prairie wind scraped across the empty churchyard, lifting red dust in slow spirals. A white ribbon danced from the fence post where it had been tied for celebration, now loose and forgotten. The sun hung low and swollen in the sky, bleeding rust across the horizon, as if even it was ashamed of what the day had become. She stood alone at the top of the chapel steps, barefoot now, her shoes clutched in one hand. The hem of her dress was dark with mud, torn in places where dry weeds had fought her passage. The veil still hung behind her like a bad idea. She didn't cry. Hadn't, even when the groom turned his horse and rode away, his hands wrapped around the waist of a girl half her age. The preacher had stepped down quietly. The guests had turned their faces. And she had remained, upright and still, long after the laughter faded. He saw her from across the road, leaning against the wagon as his boy kicked at the dry ground beside him. The child had been silent for months now. Not since the fever took his mother and left the house soaked in vinegar and silence. The man squinted at the figure in white, caught in a losing war against the wind, and something in him moved. Not pity, not kindness, something older. Maybe the recognition of another person too stubborn to fall. The saloon had gone quiet as he walked through it earlier, whispers trailing him like smoke. They said she was too old to be wanted, too proud to be quiet, too strange to be trusted. The town always needed someone to push outside the circle. When dusk finally settled and the streets emptied, she started walking. No direction, no farewell. The man stepped off his wagon. "You got someplace to be?" he asked, voice gravel thick. She looked up. Dust streaked her cheeks like war paint. "I had one." He nodded once. "I ain't offering marriage." Her brow arched, but her voice stayed flat. "I wouldn't accept it." He motioned toward the wagon. "Place out past Split Elm. Roof needs mending. So does the fence. Boy needs feeding." She glanced at the child. He stared back, wide, unreadable eyes. A hand clutching a twig like a weapon. "I work," she said. "But I don't take charity." "This ain't charity," he muttered. "It's survival." They didn't speak again on the ride back. The wagon wheels groaned over rutted earth, and the wind carried the smell of coming rain, though no clouds graced the sky. The boy curled against the sack of feed in the back, half listening to the woman hum under her breath. The tune was cracked and low, but the boy didn't cover his ears. That was something. The house was gray with age. Not weathered in a romantic way, just tired. Like it had seen too much and wasn't sure it wanted to stand much longer. He opened the door and nodded her inside. "You get the room on the left," he said. It was hers. She paused in the doorway. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame. "I'll take the floor." He didn't argue. That night, she sat on the porch after supper, knees pulled to her chest, listening to the coyotes yip in the far dark. Inside, the boy slept near the fire, curled beneath a patched quilt with a stitched feather pattern. The man sat across the room, hands around a chipped mug, staring through her like she was a ghost he didn't invite but couldn't ignore. "I don't need saving," she said. He nodded once. "Neither do I." But he didn't tell her to leave. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm of life settled into something close to tolerable. She rose before dawn, boiling coffee black and bitter. She scrubbed the blood from the barn walls after he slaughtered a calf, never flinching. She braided the boy's hair when it got too long, though he never asked her to. He just sat still, breathing slow, as her fingers worked. He watched them once through the cracked doorframe, watching the way she hummed without words and how the boy didn't move away. That night, he stayed outside until the stars chased the last of the heat from the air. She never asked about the grave under the oak tree. Never asked why the boy's shoes sat untouched for weeks in the same corner, or why his eyes followed her, but never his voice. She just worked. The town noticed. At the dry goods store, one woman asked where she'd slinked off to after the wedding. Another said she must have bewitched the widower to land a roof so fast. She didn't answer, didn't flinch, just counted her coins, bought lye, and left. Later that night, after the lanterns were out, she sat with her feet in a bucket of cold water. He stepped into the room, holding a bent nail between two fingers. "They say you're trouble," he said. "They say a lot of things," she answered. He nodded. sat down on the porch rail. Silence stretched between them like an old rope, worn but unbroken. "You keeping secrets?" he asked. She met his eyes. Would it matter? He thought on it. No. She gave him a thin smile. Then, yes. "I am." The wind howled across the prairie that night. The boy stirred in his sleep, murmuring a sound that wasn't quite a word. She rose from her cot and sat beside him, laying a hand on his forehead until he quieted. In the dark, the man watched from the hall. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not warmth. Not yet. But the ember of it. He returned to bed without speaking. And when the morning came, she was still there, stoking the fire with one hand and pouring coffee with the other, as though she'd always been. The days stretched long under the prairie sun, marked by the rhythm of small labors and silence too heavy for a place so wide open. She took to the land like someone reclaiming a part of herself, not softening, but fitting, like a blade sliding back into its sheath. The chores went from burdens to habits. Chopping kindling before sunrise, patching the chicken coop with bent nails and prayer, sweeping dust that crept through every crack like memory. He kept his distance, at first. Watched her from the shade of the barn, arms crossed, face unreadable. The boy, too, seemed caught in some middle place, neither afraid nor trusting. He followed her with his eyes, always his eyes, as she moved through the home with deliberate quiet, like someone trying not to disturb old ghosts. One morning, she caught him drawing on the floor with a burnt stick. Circles. Trees. A woman with a long braid standing next to a smaller figure. When he noticed her watching, he froze, hand hovering like a thief caught mid-act. She didn't speak, just picked up a rag and handed it to him. He wiped the boards clean, without a word. That night, after supper, she found a bundle of wildflowers tucked into her boot. No note. No name. But she knew. The widower watched them from the porch, a pipe resting between his fingers though it never lit. The boy had barely spoken since his mother died, only sounds, not language. And yet something had shifted. There was stillness in him, but not the brittle kind anymore. More like the eye of a storm. She never asked about the boy's silence. Never pushed. But she told stories while she cooked. Quiet tales with strange endings and sad beginnings. Stories about rivers that swallowed towns and women who outlived every man who loved them. The boy listened. His breathing changed during the telling, slowed into rhythm with her voice. One evening, after mending the fence by lantern light, the man spoke without looking at her. He used to sing. She said nothing, just tightened the knot in the wire. He had this little tune he'd hum when he was scared. Like a whistle through the dark. His ma taught it to him. Still she said nothing. He stopped the night she passed, he finished. Went quiet and stayed that way. Like something in him got buried with her. She nodded once. It'll come back. When he's ready. His eyes caught hers then, sharp and tired. You speak like you know something about loss. I do. The subject died there, but something loosened between them. The air less brittle. The silences less sharp. By the second week, she took to cleaning the old bedroom, the one where the boy's mother had died. No one had stepped inside since. The door creaked like a protest when she pushed it open. Dust hung thick, and the bed sagged with memory. A comb lay on the dresser beside a cracked mirror. She didn't cry, just rolled up her sleeves and worked. The man stood in the hallway, arms stiff at his sides. You don't have to. She met his gaze. Yes, I do. It took 2 days. She laundered the linens, scrubbed the boards, tossed out jars of herbs gone gray with age. When she finished, she didn't move in. She just left the window cracked and a clean quilt folded at the end of the bed. He never thanked her. But later that night, he stood in the doorway for a long time, hand resting on the frame like it anchored him to something lost. The townsfolk noticed the change. At the well, a man muttered that she looked too proud for a woman living on another man's land. A woman with sharp eyes whispered that she saw the boy holding her hand near the market. The air around her thickened with judgment, but she didn't flinch. She'd carried worse. At the homestead, tension bloomed in quieter ways. The man caught himself looking at her when she wasn't speaking. Not like a man appraising a woman. More like someone watching a storm cloud, unsure if it meant rain or ruin. And she watched him, too, watched how he winced when he lifted the saddle, how he drank alone behind the barn, how he never spoke the name of his dead wife. One night, she found him by the fence, staring off into the hills. The air was cold and dry, the kind that sucks sound out of the world. She was gentle, he said, without preamble. Not made for this place, really. But she tried. The woman stood beside him, arms folded. How'd she die? Fever. Fast. Took her before I could fetch the doc. Boy was the one who found her. Said she was cold and wouldn't wake up. She closed her eyes briefly, as though feeling that cold herself. She'd planted a garden that spring, he added, voice thinner now. But nothing ever came up. I'll try again in the fall, she said. He looked at her then. Not through her. At her. Do what you want, he said softly. You already have. She turned to go, but paused at the porch. You ever gonna ask why I was left at that church? He didn't move. Just stared at the dirt like it might hold the answer. No, he said finally. Figure you'll tell me when you want to. Or you won't. Her eyes lingered on him for a long moment. Smart man. Inside, the boy slept curled with a stuffed rag horse. She paused at the doorway and adjusted the quilt on his shoulder. In the faint firelight, he stirred, murmured something. It wasn't a word. Not quite. But it had shape and warmth, like language half remembered. She held her breath. He settled again, breath steady. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of mesquite and river silt. Somewhere far off, a coyote called once, then went quiet. In that hush, something in the house shifted. Not loud, not visible, but real. She stepped out onto the porch again, looked at the man still leaning on the fence. Some things grow slow, she said, but they grow strong. He nodded, but he didn't turn around. Not yet. The sky darkened with the kind of clouds that never gave rain, just rode low over the land like a threat. The wind had gone mean again, cutting, not singing. In town, tongues turned sharp too. Folks who once ignored her now stared longer, whispered louder. They said her name like a question no one wanted answered. At the dry goods store, the girl behind the counter pretended not to see her until there was no one else to serve. Even then, the words came slow and cold, like being polite was a burden too heavy to bear. A child asked why the lady with the ruined dress lived with the rancher and his boy. The mother answered without flinching, because no man decent wanted her. She walked home with her head high, but the air around her felt thick as pond silt, hard to breathe and full of rot. The boy walked beside her, holding a spool of twine she'd bought to fix the coop. He glanced up once, small face puzzled by things he couldn't yet name. When they reached the ranch, the man was by the corral, mending a post split by wind. She set the goods on the porch, waited until the boy ran off to chase chickens, then said, "They're talking." "They always do," he answered. "This time they're getting louder." He looked at her then, sweat on his brow, shirt stained with the work of living. "What exactly are they saying?" "That I bewitched you. That I came here to take what your wife left behind. Some are saying more." He nodded, jaw tight. "Let M. We know the truth." She stepped closer, voice low. "Do we?" His eyes narrowed. "I know what you've done here. I know how the boy looks at you. I know you haven't once asked for more than a meal and a bed of your own. That enough for you?" "For now," she said, though something behind her words held weight. That night, a rider came up the drive, tall in the saddle, his coat too fine for a working man. His horse was sleek, and his boots too clean for the road. The widower came to the porch with the boy behind his leg. The rider tipped his hat. "Evening." "State your business," the man said flat. "I'm here on behalf of a buyer," the stranger said. "Interested in this land. Wants to offer you a fair price. Said to say it's more than you'll ever pull out of this dirt. I'm not selling. You should consider. Fences falling. Roof sagging. Boy not right. This place's got rot in the bones. Sell it while it still stands." The woman stepped into the doorway, arms crossed, eyes locked on the man in the saddle. He froze, smile dimming just enough to notice. "Well," he muttered, "didn't expect to see you here." "Didn't expect to be," she said, voice even. The widower looked between them. You know this man? We've crossed paths, she said. Long ago. The writer's smile turned slick again. Her fiancé and I were brothers. She was supposed to marry him. Never made it to the altar, though. What happened? The writer shrugged. Folks say she ran. Others say she killed him. The silence after was thick as smoke. She didn't blink. He hit me. Regularly. I left before I could bury him myself. The writer leaned forward in his saddle. You've got a way of making men disappear, don't you? The widower stepped forward then, quiet but coiled. You've delivered your message. Take it back. The writer looked at her once more. You've got nerve, showing your face again. But I guess that's always been your way. He turned his horse and rode off, dust curling behind like a warning. Later, inside, the man slammed the door harder than he meant to. She stood by the hearth, arms loose at her sides. You could have told me, he said. Would it have changed anything? I don't know, he snapped. Maybe. She stepped forward, voice soft but firm. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've survived things most don't. But I haven't lied to you. Not once. He looked at her long, the kind of look that measures a person like land. Seeing not just what's there, but what could be. I need to think, he said, turning away. She didn't follow. She spent that night in the barn, curled in a patch of hay that still held warmth from the day. The boy came just after midnight, bare feet padding across the floor. He lay beside her, without speaking. She pulled the blanket up over them both. By morning, she was gone. No note. No farewell. Just silence. The boy refused to eat that day. He stood by the fence, watching the road. The man hammered boards in the barn until his hands bled. That night, he found a worn scarf of hers caught on a fence post where the wind had taken it. He pressed it to his face, inhaled the scent of smoke and soap and her. The next evening, a letter came, nailed to the porch by a knife. The writer's seal on the back. Inside, this is your only offer. Sell or lose it all. You know what I'm capable of. The man read it once, then burned it in the stove. The boy watched the flames and finally spoke. One word. A name. Her name. The man froze, eyes wide, heart caught in his throat. He knelt, took the boy by the shoulders. Say it again. The boy looked up, trembling. Bring her back, he whispered. And that was all the father needed. Dawn broke behind a curtain of smoke. The prairie wore a hush that didn't belong to morning, as if the land itself held its breath. Fence lines were cut. The coop door hung open. The water barrel lay on its side, drained into the dirt like spilled blood. The widower stepped out barefoot, shotgun in hand, heart already knowing what the land whispered before his eyes confirmed it. They'd come in the night. The boy stood at the window, lips parted, not crying, not speaking, just watching. He clutched the stuffed horse, so hard it seemed strained. The man turned to him slowly. If they come back, he said, you hide in the root cellar. You don't come out until I say. The boy nodded once, and that was enough. The day passed under a veil of waiting. No birds. No wind. Even the trees seemed to stiffen. He packed bullets with shaking hands, wrapped bandages he hoped not to need. By late afternoon, hooves broke the silence. 6 riders. The one at the front wore a dark coat that flapped like a preacher's robe, and a pistol tied low on his hip. The man stepped out into the yard, shotgun level. You picked the wrong land to trespass, he called. The rider, her former fiancé's brother, smiled without warmth. You were given a choice. You made the wrong one. You want to fight, the widower growled. You'll get one. Wasn't planning on blood, the man said. But sometimes the land needs watering to grow. Behind them, 2 riders peeled off toward the barn. Another circled toward the back. The man shifted his stance, counting seconds, planning loss. Then, a shot cracked the air like thunder. One rider dropped clean from the saddle. Heads turned. Confusion bloomed. She stood atop the ridge, rifle steady in her hands, coat flapping, braid trailing like a flag of war. Her face gave nothing. Her aim gave everything. I warned you once, she called, voice cutting through the wind. I don't run anymore. The lead rider's eyes narrowed. You should have stayed gone. You should have stayed buried like your brother. Two more shots rang out. One clipped the reins of a horse. Another shattered the lantern hanging on the fence. In the chaos, the man dashed to the corner of the house, firing once, grazing a rider's shoulder. The others scattered, returning fire. Smoke, screams, dust exploding in dry bursts around boots and hooves. She moved like she was born for it. Reload, fire, shift. Her eyes scanning for the boy between each shot. The man fought from cover, keeping fire off the porch. One of the riders broke for the house. Too close. She dropped him before he reached the door. Inside, the boy hadn't moved. He stood beside the cellar door, hands shaking, but his feet planted. When a man tried to climb through the kitchen window, the boy threw the iron kettle straight at his head. The man went down hard, groaning. Outside, the wind picked up. Thunder rolled in from the west. The scent of rain arrived on the air like a promise kept late. Then it was just the last rider, the leader. He dismounted, stepping over his men, pistol raised, slow, steady. The widower limped into the open, blood on his sleeve, eyes locked on him. "You're done," the widower spat. "You don't get to decide that." "I ain't alone anymore," the man said. "That's all the difference." The rider raised his pistol, and the boy screamed. It wasn't a word. It was raw and loud and full of everything that had been held back for too long. The scream cracked the moment open. The widower fired. The woman fired. The shot hit home, center chest. The rider staggered, eyes wide, gun clattering to the dirt. He fell with no grace, just weight and silence. And then it rained. The prairie sighed under it. The wind turned soft again, washing the blood and fire from a land. She dropped her rifle and ran to the porch, sweeping the boy into her arms. He sobbed into her shoulder, still not speaking, but his voice had found its way back. The widower leaned against the porch rail, breath ragged. She looked up at him, rain running down her face, mingling with soot and sweat. "I wasn't going to let them take it," she said. "I know," he replied. "I never should have let you go." She nodded. "Now you won't." He shook his head. "Not ever again." They buried the dead away from the oak tree. No markers. Just dirt and stones and silence. The boy helped, passing tools with solemn eyes. Afterward, the three of them sat on the porch, rain still falling in slow drips from the roof. The house stood, scarred but unbroken. The land, too. He poured her a cup of coffee and didn't offer it with words. She took it the same way. The boy curled beside her, eyes closing in peace for the first time in what felt like years. The widower reached over and placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. "You still keeping secrets?" he asked softly. "Always," she murmured, "but not the kind that matter anymore." Thunder rumbled one last time, fading into the distance. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of new grass. Something had ended, yes, but something had begun, too.